What is the hardest thing you've ever had to tell to your parents? My ex and I of 10 years amicably split up 3 months before our wedding date. When we told my parents together, I'm 100% positive they were expecting us to tell them she was pregnant. Total shock from them. To my widowed mom, that if she didn't start using the internet safely, she fell victim to romance scams twice, and stop sending money she doesn't have to strangers online. She's definitely on a fixed income. I'd get power of attorney over her and her finances. Sucks having to parent your parent. That I had cancer. I live overseas and I know how much my parents miss me. I can only imagine how they felt while I was 10,000 miles away battling it. I tried to be super positive about it. Mom only wanted to hear as much as was necessary. Dad kept on talking about all the ways I could die or could go wrong. His way of working out a situation. Cancer free for 6 months now though. Congrats. Put a smile on my face. That my sister was spreading lies about the family to her friends to get attention and pity. She told them things like stepdad hits mum and because he's a job title, they cover it up for him. I'm actually a twin but he died when we were 6 weeks old. Some were so horrible. All about being abused and how my family was rich but she never got money, food, adequate shelter because we hate her so much. I watched their faces go from confused to angry to sad. It broke my heart. One morning I got a call from a police officer who told me that my sister was found dead in her apartment and that she apparently died of a H overdose. She was living in another city and I hadn't spoken to her for 2 or 3 weeks. We knew she was addicted but went through recovery and was doing fine. Back in her job and had her live on track for nearly a year. I can't even remember the words or what exactly he told me because it swept me right off my feet. I just told him to hold on. Please hold on, I need to find a chair, and suddenly my husband was there and talking to the man on the phone. I then had to tell my parents. We drove over and my mother was alone in the kitchen and I internally screamed because my dad wasn't there. He had a small workshop and went there in the morning. So I told my mother and she just dropped onto the floor with the most horrific scream I ever heard from my mom. I then walked over to the workshop because I didn't wanted to tell my dad over the phone. I just said her name and he knew. He freaking knew right away and he just held me while we both cried and then we went back to my mom. Yeah, that was a real crappy day. It's been 7 years since I lost my sister and I still go through severe depression the weeks leading up to the date of her death. That my husband beat the crap out of me, then went to bed and overdosed on pain pills. They thought we were the perfect couple. Jesus frick. I've never been close with my mom as she was really abusive growing up, but I'm very close to my grandmother. Telling her I was moving across the country was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and I know it broke her heart, but she understood why I had to go and to this day says it was the best decision I ever made. Now I'm waiting for biopsy results to find out if I have uterine cancer. Fortunately the chances are very low, about 4%, but if I do, I don't know how I'm going to break the news to her. Update. Got the results. They came back benign. Thanks so much for the support and well wishes. Let's hope the results come out fine. My younger sister's husband called me to tell me that the baby that my sister, his wife, was carrying had died in utero. He asked me in between sobs to call my parents because my sister wanted everyone to come to the hospital before she was put into induced labor to give birth to her stillborn daughter. So I called my parents, who were in a cafe. First thing my mum said, naturally, considering what day it was happy birthday, Janie. There was no way to break the news nicely, so I just told her that sister and sister's husband's baby had been stillborn and we were all to meet them at the hospital. I'll never forget the sounds of my mum wailing with heartbreak in our local cafe. Telling my parents I flunked out of college was the hardest thing for me. I was terrified for weeks. That I had known for 10 years about the half-sibling I wasn't supposed to know about. Something similar happened to me. My dad was married to another woman before my mom and he had a daughter with her. My mom does not want me to know about her, but I just recently found out about her existence. Her and I are gonna hang out soon. An officer showed up to my house when I was 14 and the rest of my family was out of province, state, for a siblings national event. Your father has passed away and you are the next of kin available. Please inform your family so that arrangements can be made. I had to call my mother, who was 18 hours away, and inform her that my dad had died. I told her not to tell my brother because I knew a full ride scholarship was on the line and to only come home when it would not impact his future. You handled that crap like no other 14-year-old I know. Way to step up. Our parents gave up on being grandparents, but then announced my wife was pregnant. The next day she had a miscarriage. Ugh. I'm sorry bro. That hurts all around. After my first major suicide attempt, I confessed to my mom that my neighbor had raped me as a child, and that was the reason I was so depressed and unhappy all the time. After around 6 months of therapy, I had to tell my mom and my stepdad that not only did my neighbor do that to me, my father did too. The look of pure heartbreak and anguish on her face is something I know I'll never forget. When I was 17, I had to work up the courage to tell my mom I didn't think my penis worked correctly. I had no feeling due to an extreme bend. It was such a hard topic to talk about with my mother, but I'm glad I did. About 2 years, 30 doctor's visits, and 1 surgery later, I had a working penis. Brave move my dude. Might have had a wonky dong, but that must have taken some balls. Not my parents, but my grandmother. I refused to do this over the phone, and the rest of my family was incredibly angry with me for that. My mom had cancer and had to have surgery to have it removed. They kept pestering me the second the surgery was over to just call your grandma and tell her it's fine, and I had to tell them it wasn't fine. I had to tell her that the surgery went well, but they found more and it was terminal. Not only was it incredibly hard to tell my grandma her daughter was dying, but I was barely handling it myself, and everyone seemed to be angry and took it out on me. I no longer speak to any of them. My dad had been fighting cancer for about 7 months and it had metastasized to his brain and several other places. He'd had laser surgeries on his brain, radiation, and chemo for months, and it would go away but eventually come back with more tumors than before. He was losing a bit of memory from the tumors and sometimes was very lucid, and sometimes very delusional. The doctor came into his hospital room and told him they couldn't do anything else and he should start preparing his plans. My dad got angry and told the doctor leave. We didn't talk about it, and an hour later my dad turns to me and said, "Did the doctor come back yet? He was supposed to tell me if I'm getting better and when I can go home." I had to tell him he had less than 2 months to live and there's nothing else they can do for him. He just kinda looked straight forward and stared into space, and I could see him tearing up. Hardest thing I ever had to do, but I couldn't lie to him, knowing that may stick in his mind, and for his last days he'd be wondering why he wasn't getting better and be horribly confused. My wife and I were pursuing an adoption. It would have been my parents' first grandchild. Unfortunately, the adoption failed. We've since successfully adopted. My parents have both children's photos on their mantle. My in-laws actually. My mother-in-law was in the hospital with pancreatic cancer and experienced a blood clot in her leg. I pulled the cancer specialist and the circulation specialist in her room for a meeting at 5 PM on a Friday, and they finally discussed her case in front of her and her husband and my wife and her son on speakerphone. And after half an hour of medical jargon, she turned to me and asked me, in German, what it all meant. You can die in a month without your leg, or in a week with your leg. She held my hand, thought about it. I want to be able to dance in heaven. And she smiled her beautiful smile. My wife has the same smile. It's what I fell in love with the first time I saw her almost 40 years ago. When I was in high school, I worked at a fast food place. I would offer a senior discount despite it not being asked for by the customer. I would then proceed to charge them the full rate of the order and pocket the discount. Over the course of a couple of weeks, I had enough money to purchase a new Sony PSP. I would do this on weekends for party money, gas money, because I thought I could get away with it. One day, I came into work as normal, was there for maybe an hour and then was pulled into the office. My manager sent her husband through the drive-thru to see if I would offer the discount unprovoked. I did. I was fired on the spot and told that the police would meet me at my house and that I should probably let my parents know before they get there. I proceeded to freak out and was inconsolable. Took me forever to get home even though I lived 5 minutes away. I told my parents and was nervously waiting for the cops to show up. No cops ever came. My parents grounded me for the whole summer. I am so grateful I was caught. I know it was something I would have continued to do if I wouldn't have been caught. I went back to that establishment a few years later and thanked the manager for what she had done, and I apologized for everything. If I had money I would have paid it all back. I was never told a total of how much I had taken or tallied it up myself at any point. But if I had to guess, it would have been close to $1,000. I had to call and tell them I had to put my university course on hold again because I tried to kill myself again. Didn't help that my parents didn't really believe in depression. I'm glad you're still here, friend. I hope things are getting better for you. I haven't done it yet, but I found out through ancestry DNA that my father was adopted by my grandparents, except that they are actually his grandparents. Turns out his sister was actually his mother. After getting in touch with some relatives I never even knew about, but who knew my dad when they were kids, they all confirmed this to be the case. It was a family secret that my father was not supposed to know about. Everything I thought I knew about my father's side of the family is now upended. I was contacted by a guy whose half-uncle is my dad's actual father. Putting my father's picture next to that guy's picture is like looking at twins. I always thought my grandmother, now my great-grandmother, was kind of old to have a child when my father was born. She'd have been in her mid-40s, but I just thought whatever. And the photos of my now great-grandfather, whom I never met, look nothing like my father at all. No resemblance. I'm struggling with how to approach my dad about this. He's 84 now. I kind of think he found out the truth over 50 years ago when he abruptly moved us all out of California to North Carolina and never contacted anybody from his family ever again. Like, not ever. So if he did know, then he's been lying to us for 50 plus years. If he didn't know, it might be a terrible shock. I don't know what I should do. Having to tell my mum that the stroke she had suffered was bad enough to leave a significant portion of her brain damaged, and that it was unlikely she would gain full use of her left arm again, or teach again. She's only recently finished her university degree, and had been a relief teacher for about 2 years, and her career was picking up speed when she'd suffered the stroke. And holding her while she cried because everything she'd worked so hard for was gone in minutes. Or explaining to my father that I had intentionally overdosed in an attempt to kill myself, and that he needed to take me to the hospital because I was pretty sure I was dying. This must have been really hard. I'm glad you told him and lived. Wasn't hard but real awkward for me. I knocked on mom's door at 2 AM to tell her my sisters collapsed and took a bunch of pills. I had to do this twice as I have 2 older sisters who both tried to off themselves years apart. I had to ring my mum and tell her that my daughter had died. I was 36 weeks pregnant at the time and my mum was getting my younger brothers off to school. She rushed to be by my side during everything that came next. The induction, the birth. She bathed my daughter's body and dressed her for me while I had to have surgery. She walked through the hospital grounds with me with my daughter in a pram for the only walk I got to take her on. She mourned with me and still does 7.5 years on. Jesus Christ. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine going through that. Just reading it made me cry. When I said I'm sorry for doing this, but it's what's best for you right now. I love you mommy, then I kissed her forehead and signed the comfort care papers and watched as the nurse started sputting off the machines that were keeping my mother alive. This brings back painful memories. Hugs. This happened when I was 23 and had recently moved back in with my parents. That I had met someone in a different state and was going to fly there to meet him after only a month of talking, texting, and video chatting. I lived in Oregon and he lived about 760 miles away in California. We met through a harmony. My dad was convinced that the day I left for the airport was going to be the last day he saw his daughter alive. I gave my parents all my flight info, the make and model of his vehicle, his cell phone number, a picture of him, and the license plate of his car. I was trying to be smart with a potentially unsmart decision. About 8 months after that, I had to tell my parents that I was moving to California to live with him. It was perfect timing in my life and I felt like it was something I just had to do. My parents helped move me down to California and finally got to meet him. They did not agree with my decision but were still supportive. We got married in October and are expecting our first child in a few weeks. He also has a really good relationship with my parents. He is always asking my dad for advice and my dad finally has the son that he has always wanted. Oh my god, I am so happy this didn't end like I thought. When my best friend begged me to tell my parents what I'd done, I went to their room at 2 AM and they were awake and just looked at me. Of course they knew something was wrong. Telling my dad I had overdosed in a suicide attempt was literally the hardest thing to ever tell anyone. He didn't even react much, just went silent and drove me to hospital. As life has gone on, I stopped feeling bad or like I'll be judged for what I tell my parents. However, the scariest and hardest crap I have ever had to do was as a 16-year-old phone my dad completely obliterated drunk telling him I need to be picked up at the police station because I was riding my scooter motorbike on pavements with 2 other passengers on the back. I have no idea what happened to them or how they got off, but I was arrested and taken in and I have no idea what happened to my scooter that night. What makes it worse was I didn't have a license to ride it either. My dad was so chilled about it. Nothing was said about it the next day, and we have actually never spoken about it again. I had to tell my mom that her 2-year son had fallen out a window. It was on the 2nd story and was over the driveway. I was around 10 years old. Still get nauseous remembering that run to her room. Oh dear, I can't imagine that having any good outcome. I'm sorry for you and your mom. You were too young to be responsible for looking after a 2-year-old. I hope you know that. When I was 19, I had just signed a year lease on an apartment. I was in tech school, and I had job at a dealer service department that also worked with the school. It was also 2008. I was the first out the door when the crash started. I wish I could only blame the economy, but I was also a little 19-year-old crap who didn't know how to act. Didn't matter. The rest of the shop closed the next year anyway. I managed to get a job at a tire store, which I thought would pull me out of the fire, but they laid me off inside of 6 weeks. Having to call and tell them that my whole adult life was crashing and burning and I couldn't pay rent was not fun. I was out of work for 1.5 years. Every time they called to ask if I found another job, I had to admit that I hadn't and be made aware of what a disappointment I was turning out to be. I'm still paying the student loans that I had to pay my rent with. I have never had my stomach drop at the words. It was also 2008, but you changed that. That I was being suspended because a security had caught me and my then GF having sex in the back of a car on the school parking lot. Definitely one of the hardest things I've done in my life. I told my loving mother that I had been depressed and that there was a time where I didn't want to live anymore. It came as a huge shock to her and she was of course devastated. She cried. I cried. I felt guilty for making her feel bad as I have a life that most people would kill to get. A loving family, amazing friends, I'm relatively fit, graduating college and so forth. And yet if there would have been a way to go without hurting those close to me, I wouldn't have taken it. Imagine being a mother and having your dear child that you love and seems to be enjoying life tell you that. Now imagine telling your mother that, knowing how bad it would hurt her. It's even harder knowing that you have a perfectly good life that many people are dying to have. People go through so much crap and yet they manage to go on. And then here I was with a seemingly great life and still wanting to go. I haven't worked up the courage to tell my dad or siblings, and perhaps never will. It is not because people are considered successful that they are happy. While it must have been a shock, know that your mother would want to know something like this so she can help lift some of that burden. There's a lot of energy wasted in trying to look happy. Better use it for actually being happy. I'm female. Female cousin coerced me to do inappropriate sexual things to her when I was under the age of 10 and had no idea what it meant, and I then kept it a secret for over a decade. I hope you're healing. I had to call my mom telling her that my brother had locked his door and sent me a picture of his empty pill bottle, meaning he was trying to overdose. Luckily, she got there in time and they pumped his stomach at the hospital. So he's ally good. I also remember me and my brother sitting down with my mom when we were 14 and 12 and told her to divorce our dad. He was abusive towards her and we were sick of it. Whoa, I can't imagine telling a parent to divorce another parent, let alone at those ages. Good on you guys. I hope she listened to you both. Throwaway account obviously. Anyway, I am a preacher's kid, hence PK in my name. I am not just any preacher's kid, but my father is the preacher of one of the largest megachurches on the East Coast. I had to tell my parents, and the rest of my extremely religious family, that I was an atheist. The aftermath of my similar experience was being told I no longer get Christmas gifts. I just said, alright, but I think you need to sort out your priorities. It may not be as hard as some of the others here, but when I got hit by a car on my bike, I had a random stranger tell me to call my parents. I didn't want to because I was stubborn, as well as the fact that we were fighting earlier in the day and I didn't want to call and have them be mad at me for being stupid and getting hit by a car. I know that is not how they would have reacted, nor how they reacted, but at the time it was a worrying thought. The hardest thing I had to tell my mom was I was moving out and into my dad's place. After she overdosed again, I just told myself I couldn't do it anymore. I'm thankful I did. It definitely improved me as a person looking back, but it was dang hard. Talking about my sexuality and my depression, it did not go well. My mother is still in denial over the sexuality part and will get angry at me if I so much as mention it. And concerning the depression part, she blew up on me, called me ungrateful, selfish and stupid. It hurts when you tell your own mother you feel so terrible that you wish you wouldn't exist. And that's all she has to say. We don't talk much anymore, just small talk, but I think I shouldn't have expected anything else. I suggest every time you say hello or goodbye to your mother, throw in "I'm gay" at the end. Good morning mum, I'm gay. I had to tell my grandma her son had died. She's currently 104. At the time she was late 90s. She had had a long stretch with repeat duties. She also wasn't very present. So over the course of several weeks, after speaking with her carers, we told her that he was ill, that it looked serious, that we were concerned, and that eventually he had died. This took place some time after he had died. Grandma wouldn't have been well enough physically or mentally to attend the funeral. She has lacked capacity for many years now. Yes, she's been assessed by someone qualified. It was a heartbreaking day. We honestly thought she would die with the shock, but she didn't. That I was bisexual and that my friend was my girlfriend. Dang. It was tough, and it wasn't just tough to tell them but to live with the aftermath. Things are a lot better now. Just had to have the same talk with my parents about my male friend whose house I'd been sleeping at 5 nights out of the week. It was a shock because I'd dated plenty of girls and bisexuality wasn't something they understood at first. Still a little weird, but I feel much better now. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.